The piercing scream echoed through the metal corridors of the Yamata-no-Orochi Floating Academy. As I plummeted through the gravitational well, my consciousness fragmented into 5 distinct pieces. Each part of me controlled a different cybernetic dragon, its biomechanical jaws closing around enemy soldiers like scissors cutting paper. Warm blood splattered against the glass of my cockpit as I felt each death through the neural interface, not just once, but 5 times simultaneously, multiplying the agony until my screams became indistinguishable from the metallic roars of the beasts I commanded. My eyes bled crimson tears as quantum link neural syndrome tore my mind to pieces, each dragon demanding a different fragment of my soul. Through my fractured vision, I saw General Yamamoto watching me through the monitors, his half-cybernetic face contorted into an expression that mixed scientific fascination and genuine horror. He knew what I was capable of. He knew the price I would pay. And yet he forced me into that cabin. When the last alien invader was torn apart by the nanotech claws of my dragons, I collapsed against the controls, convulsing violently as my consciousness tried to reassemble itself. But something had changed forever. In the reflections of the metal surfaces around me, I could see echoes of other versions of myself. Some crying, others smiling with insane cruelty, all watching me with eyes that were no longer completely mine. Before we continue with this disturbing story, don't forget to subscribe to the Joven Sobernaturized channel for more mind-bending content. And in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from. I love to know where our brave listeners who venture into these dark narratives are from. When you've finished listening to the whole story, give it a rating from 0 to 10 and comment on what you liked best. Your feedback is essential for us to bring you more stories that will stick in your mind. The Awakening of the Anomaly. My name is Akira Nakamura. I'm 17 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed I was just another hacker on the cyber streets of Shibuya trying to survive in Neo-Tokyo. The biomechanical tattoos covering my slender body aren't decorations. They're external neural circuits that pulse with electric blue light every time my brain processes data at superhuman speeds. My parents abandoned me when these marks first appeared at the age of 8, convinced that I was a technological freak who would bring bad luck to the family. For 9 years, I lived hidden in the underground tunnels of the megacity, hacking corporate systems to earn enough credits to buy synthetic protein and keep my little companion robot running. Kenji, my mechanical origami, was my only real family. Rudimentary AI I had programmed to keep me company on lonely nights when sensory overload left me paralyzed for hours. Everything changed on a Monday morning when I woke up in my dormitory capsule in District 47 to find soldiers from the Bushido military corporation breaking down my door. Their holographic battle suits glowed with insignia I recognized from the news. They were hunters of neurological anomalies, specialists in capturing people like me for military laboratories. Akira Nakamura, said the leader, his voice amplified by his helmet's voice modulator. You are being recruited for compulsory military service under National Emergency Law 2049. I tried to run, of course. My neural implants gave me enhanced reflexes, and I knew every alley and secret passage in the district. But they had something I'd never seen before. Quantum darts that paralyzed me at the molecular level, freezing my body while my mind continued to function at accelerated speed, processing every second of terror in crystal clear detail. When I regained consciousness, I was in a white, sterile cell, 2,000 meters above sea level, in the Yamata-no-Orochi Floating Academy. Through the transparent wall, I could see Tokyo Bay stretching to the horizon, dotted with other floating military platforms. Holograms of virtual cherry trees danced in the air around me, a cruel irony considering I was essentially trapped in a technological prison. That's when he appeared. General Kenji Yamamoto was a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of a cyberpunk nightmare. The left half of his face had been replaced with titanium prosthetics that glowed with integrated neural circuits, creating a disturbing contrast with his natural brown eye and blood-red artificial one. He studied me through the glass as if I were a fascinating scientific specimen, his artificial pupils adjusting to capture every detail of my appearance. Quantum link neural syndrome, he said, reading something on a holographic tablet. Case number 0001, the first documented neurological anomaly capable of simultaneous multiple interfaces. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, though my heart was racing. For years, I had hidden my ability to connect to multiple systems simultaneously, processing information from various sources at once. It was what made me such an efficient hacker, but it was also what caused the sensory overload that left me unconscious for hours. Yamamoto smiled, a gesture that looked grotesque due to his facial prosthetics. Akira, you can try to lie to me, but you can't lie to the neural scanners that have been monitoring your brain activity for the last 6 hours. Your mind operates on 5 distinct quantum frequencies simultaneously. That's impossible for a normal human brain. He activated a hologram that showed 5 different cybernetic dragons, their serpentine metallic forms moving with deadly predatory grace. These are our most advanced weapons against the alien invasion that began 2 years ago. Each dragon requires a pilot with a perfect neural interface. So far, we've lost 80% of our pilots because their brains can't process the amount of data necessary to control these machines. My stomach clenched as I realized the implications. You want me to pilot these things? Not just one, Yamamoto said, his eyes shining with a mixture of scientific excitement and something darker. We want you to pilot all 5 simultaneously. Your neurological anomaly may be exactly what we need to turn this war around. I rose from the bed, my fists clenched. And if I refuse? The general tapped a button on his tablet, and the cell wall became transparent, revealing an aerial view of Neo-Tokyo. But it wasn't the city I knew. Giant craters marked where entire districts used to stand. Skyscrapers were reduced to twisted metal skeletons, and on the horizon, alien ships the size of mountains hovered like mechanical vultures, firing beams of energy that vaporized everything they touched. Then humanity will die, he said simply, and you will die knowing you could have made a difference. Hot tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the magnitude of the destruction. It wasn't just my freedom that was at stake. It was the survival of our species. For 9 years, I had hidden from the world, convinced that my neural anomaly was a curse. Now I was discovering that it might be humanity's only hope. How long do I have to decide? I asked, my voice breaking. Yamamoto turned off the hologram and walked toward the exit. Your first training session begins in 2 hours. Use that time to prepare yourself mentally, Akira, because once you step into that cockpit, there's no turning back. What you are, today will die, and something new, perhaps better, perhaps worse, will be born in its place. When he left, I collapsed to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. Kenji, my companion robot, crawled out of my pocket where he had been hiding. During the entire conversation, his small origami wings unfolded as he stared at me with his blue LED eyes. Akira-chan, said his synthesized voice, programmed to sound like a child. Are you afraid? I wiped away my tears and took him in my hands, feeling the warm metal against my skin. I'm terrified, Kenji, but I don't think we have a choice. The 2 hours passed like minutes. When the guards came to get me, I had made my decision. They escorted me through endless corridors, past laboratories where technicians worked on cybernetic dragon components. Their organic forms blended with technology in a way that defied logic. The smell of hot metal and synthetic biological fluids permeated the air, creating an atmosphere that was simultaneously familiar and alien. We finally arrived at what they called the main interface chamber, a gigantic hangar where 5 cybernetic dragons were suspended in maintenance pods. Each was approximately 15 meters long, their serpentine bodies covered in nanotech, scales that glowed with neural energy. Their heads were majestic and terrifying, with jaws capable of cutting through military armor, and eyes that seemed to contain primitive artificial intelligence. In the center of the hangar, a piloting chair was connected to 5 different neural cables, each pulsing with light that corresponded to one of the dragons. The chair itself looked like a technological throne, covered with biometric sensors and neural interface needles that would connect directly to my nervous system. Impressive, isn't it? Said Yamamoto, appearing at my side. Each dragon was built using DNA from extinct giant Komodo dragons, fused with cutting-edge military nanotechnology. They have limited consciousness, enough to follow complex orders, but not enough to question commands. I approached one of the dragons, reaching out to touch its metallic scales. The material was warm to the touch, almost like real skin, and I could swear I felt a subtle pulse running through it. Are they alive? In a sense, yes, the general admitted. The line between machine and organism was blurred long ago. These dragons are hybrids, part technology, part genetically modified living creature. And through the neural interface, you will become part of them as well. My first attempt at neural interfacing with the cybernetic dragons nearly killed me. Yamamoto positioned me in the pilot's chair while technicians in biosuits adjusted the neural cables around my head. Each needle that pierced my skin sent waves of electric pain through my nervous system, but it was nothing compared to what was to come. The biomechanical tattoos on my body began to pulse in sync with the cables, creating a network of connections that spread like liquid fire through my veins. We'll start with just one dragon, said the general, watching the vital monitors that tracked my every heartbeat. The blue Ryujin, our most stable model. When the connection was established, my consciousness exploded into a million fragments of sensation. Suddenly, I was no longer sitting in the chair. I was flying, my serpentine body cutting through the air with impossible speed. I could feel every metallic scale of the dragon as if it were my own skin, every artificial, neural impulse as if it were my own thoughts. The world expanded around me into a spectrum of vision that included X-rays, infrared, and electromagnetic frequencies that the human eye could never perceive. But there was something else in the connection, an ancient, furious presence that wasn't entirely artificial. The dragon had fragmented memories of its organic origin, genetic echoes of the giant Komodo dragons that had been used in its creation. These memories mingled with programmed combat protocols, creating a hybrid consciousness that craved hunting and destruction. Screams. I realized they were my own screams echoing through the hangar as my body convulsed in the chair. Blood poured from my nose and ears as my brain struggled to process the overload of information. The technicians rushed to disconnect the cables, but Yamamoto stopped them with a wave of his hand. "Leave it," he said, his artificial eyes glowing with morbid fascination. "She's adapting." And he was right. Slowly, painfully, my mind began to expand to accommodate the dragon's consciousness. I learned to filter the sensations, to separate my own thoughts from the creature's impulses. It was like learning to breathe underwater. Impossible until suddenly it wasn't. When I finally managed to stabilize the connection, I had Blue Ryujin perform a series of basic flight maneuvers. Its grace was indescribable, 15 meters of mechanical death moving with the fluidity of a water snake. Through its artificial eyes, I saw the other 4 dragons suspended in their cocoons, and a terrible hunger grew inside me. My neural anomaly didn't want to control just one dragon. It wanted them all. "Disconnect her," Yamamoto ordered after 20 minutes of testing. "That's enough for today." But when the technicians tried to remove the neural cables, they discovered that my nervous system had literally grown around them. Tiny strands of neural tissue extended from the connection points, fusing with the technology in a way that the doctors said was impossible. "This is fascinating," murmured Dr. Hashimoto, the head of the biotechnology division, examining the results of my tests. "Your body is adapting to the interface at a cellular level. It's as if you're evolving in real time." I spent the next 3 weeks in a brutal routine of training and experimentation. Every morning, I was awakened at 5 o'clock for physical exercises designed to strengthen my body to withstand the demands of the neural interface. My muscles were stretched beyond normal human limits by machines that bombarded my nervous system with electrical stimuli, preparing me for the seizures that inevitably accompanied the piloting sessions. The afternoons were devoted to psychological training. A military psychologist named Dr. Sato tried to teach me meditation techniques to maintain my sanity when my consciousness fragmented between multiple dragons. She herself seemed disturbed by the implications of what they were doing to me. "Akira," she said during a particularly difficult session, "do you understand that what we are trying to do has never been attempted before? We have no data on the long-term effects of simultaneous multiple interfaces." I was lying on a medical bed, electrodes stuck to my head while machines monitored my brain activity. "You're using me as a guinea pig," I replied, my voice breaking with exhaustion. "We're trying to save our species," she corrected, but she couldn't hide the guilt in her voice. The nights were the worst. Alone in my cell, I dreamed of the dragons. These weren't normal dreams. They were residual neural connections that allowed me to feel their hybrid consciousness, even when I was disconnected. They dreamed too, and their dreams were a disturbing mix of genetic memories of ancestral hunts and programmed protocols of destruction. It was during one of these nights that I discovered I wasn't alone in the academy. Through the metal walls, I could hear other sounds: low moans, muffled screams, whispered conversations in languages I didn't recognize. There were other recruits in the facility, other neurological anomalies being subjected to similar experiments. On a Thursday, I met one of them. Yuki Tanaka was only 15, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. Her hair had turned completely white from the stress of neural experimentation, and her skin was covered in scars where the interface cables had been repeatedly connected. She was being trained to control swarms of reconnaissance drones, her mind fragmented into hundreds of small, simultaneous artificial consciousnesses. "How long have you been here?" I asked when we met in the common cafeteria during one of the rare breaks in training. 8 months, she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Are you the new multiple anomaly? Everyone's talking about you." "Everyone?" Yuki looked around nervously before leaning closer. "There are 17 of us here, different types of neurological anomalies. Most don't survive more than 6 months of training." My blood ran cold. "What happens to them?" "Irreversible neural fragmentation," she murmured. "Their minds shatter completely. They're kept in a special medical ward, hooked up to life support machines, their consciousness lost forever to the systems they tried to control." That night, lying in my bed, I contemplated running away again. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw images of the destruction of Neo-Tokyo, the craters where entire neighborhoods used to be, and I felt the growing hunger of the cybernetic, dragons calling my consciousness back to their metallic forms. The next morning, Yamamoto appeared in my cell with a darker expression than usual. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "The aliens launched a coordinated attack on 3 coastal cities during the night. We've lost contact with Osaka, Kobe, and Hiroshima." I sat up in bed, wide awake. All 3? Simultaneously? They're learning our tactics, adapting their strategies. He activated a hologram showing real-time attack maps. "Our conventional forces are being slaughtered. We need to speed up your training." "I've only been able to control 1 dragon at a time so far," I protested. "You said it would be a gradual process." Yamamoto's artificial eyes flashed with an intense red light. "The luxury of gradual progress is over, Akira. Today you will attempt simultaneous interface with 2 dragons. If you survive, we will try 3 tomorrow." 2 hours later, I was back in the pilot's chair, but this time with twice as many neural cables piercing my skin. The blue Ryujin and the green Seiryu hovered in their activation cocoons, their hybrid consciousnesses calling to mine like technological sirens. When the second connection was established, my reality fragmented in an indescribable way. Suddenly, I was in 2 places at once, flying through the artificial clouds surrounding the academy with Ryujin, while simultaneously performing underwater combat maneuvers with Seiryu in the simulated waters of the training tank. The pain was beyond anything I had ever experienced. It was like having my brain torn in half and each half forced to operate independently. Blood gushed from my eyes, nose, and ears as my body convulsed violently in the chair. But this time, instead of fighting the fragmentation, I tried to embrace it. And something extraordinary happened. Instead of 2 separate consciousnesses, I began to experience a unified multidimensional perception. I could feel both dragons as extensions of my own body, coordinating their movements with perfect synchronicity that defied the laws of neural physics. It was like being a divine mind controlling multiple celestial bodies simultaneously. "Incredible," I heard Yamamoto murmur through the speakers. "Your brain patterns are creating a quantum network. That's theoretically impossible." I made the 2 dragons perform a complex aerial dance, their mirrored movements creating impossible geometric patterns in the air. Through their 4 artificial eyes, I could see the academy from angles no human had ever seen before. perceiving spatial depths in dimensions that had no name. But with power came a terrible price. When I was finally disconnected after an hour of dual interfacing, I discovered that part of my memory had been lost. I couldn't remember the name of my elementary school teacher, or the color of the eyes of the only friend I had before living on the streets. Small pieces of my identity had been sacrificed to create neural space for the dragon's consciousnesses. "It's normal," Dr. Hashimoto said when I reported my memory loss. "Your mind is reorganizing itself to accommodate superhuman capabilities. Some less important memories will be discarded to make room for quantum processing." But I knew it wasn't just about processing space. Every time I connected to the dragons, a part of my humanity was drained, replaced by something colder and more predatory. I could feel my empathy diminishing, my ability to connect emotionally with other human beings gradually eroded by the hybrid consciousness of the creature machines. That night, Kenji crawled into my lap as I stared at the ceiling of my cell. "Akira-chan?" His childlike synthetic voice said, "Do you still love me?" The question broke my heart, because it took me a few seconds to process the answer. The emotional connection I had always felt with my little robotic companion was distant, as if I were seeing him through several layers of glass. "I will always love you, Kenji," I replied finally. But even as I spoke the words, I could feel their falseness. Another part of my humanity had been sacrificed on the altar of military necessity. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I could feel the dragons calling me, their hybrid consciousnesses promising power beyond human imagination, the power to protect what remained of humanity, even if it meant ceasing to be completely human in the process. The first real battle took place on a rainy Tuesday, when the aliens decided that Neo-Tokyo would be their next target for extermination. I woke up to deafening sirens echoing through the academy corridors and red emergency lights painting the metal walls with bloody hues. Yamamoto burst into my cell without knocking, his neural exoskeleton already activated and pulsing with real-time tactical data. "They're coming," he said, his voice distorted by combat amplifiers. 50 motherships detected on the horizon. ETA, 45 minutes until they reach the city. My stomach dropped. During the weeks of training, I had managed to interface with 3 dragons simultaneously for short periods, but never in a real combat situation. The neural pain had become a constant companion, and large chunks of my personal memory continued to disappear after each session. I could barely remember what my life was like before the academy. "I'm not ready," I protested, rising from the bed with shaky legs. 3 dragons simultaneously nearly killed me in the last session. You want me to try 5 in actual combat? Yamamoto's artificial eyes flashed with a cold red light. "Akira, if you don't try, in an hour, Neo-Tokyo will be a smoking crater and 20 million people will be dead, including every child, every elderly person, every person you've ever known on the streets of Shibuya." The image hit me like a punch in the stomach. Shibuya, the cyber streets where I had grown up, the black market tech markets where I had learned to hack, the alleys where I had slept during storms. It would all be radioactive vapor if I didn't act. 15 minutes. Later, I was being escorted to the main hangar, where the 5 cybernetic dragons were suspended in combat formation. Blue Ryujin, green Seiryu, red Suzaku, white Byakko, and black Genbu, each a masterpiece of biotechnological destruction that responded only to my specific neural anomaly. The pilot chair had been modified for a quintuple interface, 5 sets of neural cables, each thicker than my fist, weighted to pierce specific points in my skull and spine. Dr. Hashimoto was present to monitor my vital signs, but his expression revealed that he did not expect me to survive the process. "Remember," Yamamoto said as the technicians positioned me in the chair, "you only have one chance. If the interface fails, we won't have time for a second attempt before the aliens reach the city." When the first neural cable penetrated my skin, the pain was like being struck by lightning. The second cable made my vision explode into kaleidoscopic fragments. With the third, I began to convulse violently. With the fourth, blood spurted from my mouth as my brain struggled not to collapse completely. When the 5th cable connected, my consciousness shattered into so many fragments that for a terrifying moment I thought I had died. Then something miraculous and terrifying happened. Instead of 5 separate consciousnesses fighting for control, my mind expanded in a way that defied all human understanding of neuroscience. Suddenly, I was no longer Akira Nakamura. I was a collective entity of 6 interconnected consciousnesses. 5 cybernetic dragons and a 17-year-old girl fused into a hive mind that operated on multiple quantum frequencies simultaneously. Through 10 artificial eyes, I saw the world with impossible clarity. Each dragon processed different spectra of reality. Ryujin saw electromagnetic fields, Seiryu detected heat signatures, Suzaku analyzed radiation patterns, Byako mapped molecular density, and Genbu processed gravitational waves. Together, we created a multidimensional perception that transformed reality into a symphony of pure data. "My God," I heard Yamamoto mutter faintly through the speakers. "Their brain patterns. That's not human. That's something completely new." And he was right. What I had become in those moments transcended any definition of humanity. It was as if my consciousness had instantly evolved into a higher life form, capable of processing information at speeds bordering on local omniscience. I launched the 5 Academy dragons into a combat formation that had never been attempted before. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, each anticipating the other's maneuvers with absolute mechanical precision. Through the charged atmosphere of Neo-Tokyo, we flew toward the alien ships approaching like a storm of living metal. The first contact with the enemy was an explosion of violence that redefined my understanding of war. The alien ships were gigantic organic creatures, hybrids of technology and biology that pulsed with malevolent life energy. Their surfaces writhed like living skin, while metal tentacles extended to capture and drain the life from the dragons. When Red Suzaku sliced through the hull of a ship with his superheated claws, green fluid bubbled from the wound like alien blood. But through the quintuple interface, I could anticipate every enemy movement before it happened. Green Seiryu dove through a formation of alien fighters, its jaws closing around organic cockpits and crushing the pilots with enough force to liquefy bones. White Byako used his blade wings to slice through a mothership, dividing it into perfect geometric sections that plummeted in flames into Tokyo Bay. The carnage was indescribable, but through the hybrid consciousness, I felt each death like a note in a symphony of destruction. There was no longer any distinction between enemy and prey. There were only targets to be eliminated with perfect mathematical efficiency. That's when I realized something was wrong with me. During a pause in the battle as we recharged the dragon's energy systems, I looked down through Black Genbu's eyes and saw human bodies in the streets of Neo-Tokyo. Refugees trying to escape the combat zone, entire families carrying their belongings in utter despair. And instead of feeling compassion or urgency to protect them, all I felt was irritation. They were unnecessary obstacles on the battlefield, complications that hindered optimized combat strategies. "No," I whispered through the neural interface, struggling to regain my lost humanity. "They are people. I am fighting to save them." But the hive mind I had become processed this information as irrelevant data. The cybernetic dragons had no emotional capacity for compassion, only programmed impulses for hunting and destruction. And the longer I remained connected to their consciousnesses, the more my own human empathy was eroded. The second wave of alien attacks arrived like a storm of metal tentacles and energy beams that vaporized everything they touched. This time, they had learned from the first battle, adapting their tactics to neutralize my mobility advantages. Smaller ships surrounded me in a spherical formation, creating a cage of crossfire that made escape impossible. That was when I discovered an ability that even Yamamoto had not anticipated. Instead of trying to escape the trap, I allowed my consciousness to fragment further, sending echoes of my mind through parallel quantum dimensions. Suddenly, there weren't just 5 dragons on the battlefield. There were dozens of ghostly versions of them, each existing in a slightly different reality but visible to the alien tracking systems. The resulting chaos was absolute. The aliens began firing at targets that were simultaneously real and imaginary, their targeting systems overwhelmed by conflicting data. I took advantage of the confusion to launch a coordinated attack that destroyed the enemy command ship in a nuclear explosion that lit up the night sky like a second sun. But the use of this quantum ability took a devastating toll on my sanity. When the battle finally ended 3 hours later, with the remains of the alien ship sinking into Tokyo, Bay like organic meteors, I discovered that I could no longer completely distinguish between reality and the parallel dimensions I had accessed. Echoes of other versions of myself whispered in my mind, some victorious, some dead, some that had never been captured by the Academy. When the technicians finally disconnected me from the dragons, I collapsed from the pilot's chair like a broken doll. Blood poured from every orifice of my face, and my skin was pale as paper from extreme neural stress. But worse than the physical pain was the terrifying realization that I hadn't remembered my own name for a few seconds. Akira! Yamamoto rushed to my side, checking my vital signs with portable medical equipment. You did it! You saved the city! But when I looked at him, I felt no triumph or relief. I felt only emptiness. As if an essential part of my soul had been burned away during the quintuple interface, leaving only a cold hole where human emotion used to be. How many did I kill? I asked, my voice sounding strangely distant to my own ears. Approximately 1,000 enemy ships, he replied, consulting his tablet. You saved 20 million lives. I nodded mechanically, processing the information as statistical data rather than moral reality. This was exactly how dragons would process such information, cold numbers without emotional context. That night, lying in the medical ward with machines monitoring every bodily function, I contemplated what I had become. Through the window, I could see Neo-Tokyo still glowing with life in the city lights. Families sleeping safely thanks to my sacrifice. Children who would grow up to have futures because I had chosen to fragment my humanity. But when Kenji crawled onto my bed, his little mechanical paws groping for my hand, I discovered that I could no longer feel affection for him. The love I had always felt for my robotic companion had been cauterized during the battle, replaced by a clinical assessment of his functional utility. Akira-chan, are you okay? He asked, his blue, LED eyes glowing with programmed concern. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to force some emotion, any remnant of human affection. But there was only cold analysis. Weight, 200 grams. Function, emotional companion. Status, obsolete. I'm fine, Kenji, I lied, because lying was more efficient than explaining the truth. That every military victory turned me more into a living weapon and less into a person. That saving humanity might require me to stop being human altogether. And in the darkness of the infirmary, surrounded by machines whispering data about my deteriorating condition, I began to wonder if the price of victory wasn't too high to be worth paying. 3 weeks after the Battle of Neo-Tokyo, I discovered the truth about who I really was, and that discovery almost destroyed me completely. It all started when I woke up one Friday morning and couldn't remember the color of my mother's eyes. No matter how hard I tried to force the memory, there was only a cold void where that information should have been. It was as if larger pieces of my identity were being erased to make neural space for the dragon's consciousnesses. Concerned about the rapid deterioration of my memory, I decided to hack into the Academy's medical files to understand what was happening to me. During my years on the streets of Shibuya, my hacking skills had become legendary among underground hackers. Now, with my neural implants modified by the dragon's interface, my data processing capabilities had expanded to superhuman levels. It took me only 15 minutes to penetrate Japan's most secure military database. What I found in the classified files froze me to the bone. Project Chimera, confidential Omega-level file. Subject, Akira Nakamura. Designation, experimental clone A0AO. The first line hit me like a bullet to the chest. Clone. I was a clone. I continued reading with trembling hands, each word revealing a truth more horrible than the last. I had not been born naturally. I had been created in a laboratory 17 years ago as part of a secret military program. My base DNA had been extracted from Kenji Yamamoto when he was 20, before the injuries that turned him into a cyborg. But the scientists weren't satisfied with simply cloning a normal human. They modified my genetic code with material from 5 different species of extinct reptiles, creating the neurological foundation that allowed me to interface with multiple consciousnesses. Quantum link neural syndrome was not a natural anomaly. It was a feature specifically designed to control cybernetic dragons that didn't even exist when I was created. But the most devastating revelation was in the last section of the file. Note: Clone A01 developed unplanned emotional bonds during testing on the streets. Elimination of pre-recruitment affective memories is recommended to maximize combat efficiency. Memories of family and childhood are artificial constructs implanted for psychological stability during development. My entire life was a lie. The parents who abandoned me at age 8 never existed. My childhood on the streets of Shibuya had been a controlled test, monitored by undercover military agents who ensured that I developed exactly the skills necessary for the project. Every moment of pain, every night sleeping in the cold, every desperate hack to get food, it had all been staged to mold me into the perfect weapon. Even Kenji, my companion robot, had been planted in my life 3 years ago to establish emotional bonds that would prevent me from questioning military orders. I collapsed on the floor of my cell, vomiting violently as my mind struggled to process the magnitude of the betrayal. 17 years of life, 17 years of emotions, memories, relationships, all fabricated by military scientists as part of a decades-long experiment. No, I whispered into the empty air, hot tears streaming down my face. This can't be true. I remember being hungry, being afraid. But even as I tried to cling to the memories of my childhood, I could feel them, crumbling like mist in the sun. Now that I knew the truth, I could see the subtle artificiality of the implanted memories. They were too detailed in certain areas, too vague in others. Perfect as simulations, but imperfect as real experiences. That was when Yamamoto appeared at the door of my cell. "You hacked the files," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. His artificial eyes scanned my face, probably analyzing my stress patterns to determine exactly how much I had discovered. "You're my father," I accused, my voice breaking with raw emotion. "Biologically, at least. How could you do this to me?" The general entered the cell and closed the door behind him. For a moment, I saw something that could have been remorse pass across his remaining human features. "Akira, you need to understand the context. When the project began 17 years ago, we knew an alien invasion was inevitable. We needed biological weapons capable of taking on technology beyond our understanding. So you created a daughter to serve as a disposable weapon," I replied, rising from the floor with clenched fists. "You planted false memories in my head to keep me stable until I was useful." "The memories aren't completely false," he protested. "You really did live on the streets. You really did learn how to hack systems. You really did develop bonds with Kenji. We just directed those experiences to maximize your military potential." The rage that exploded inside me was unlike any emotion I had ever felt. It was pure, crystalline, distilled into absolute hatred. "You stole my entire life, every happy moment, every personal achievement, all manipulated to turn me into a more efficient weapon." Yamamoto activated his neural exoskeleton, preparing for whatever might come next. "Akira, I understand your anger, but you saved 20 million lives in the Battle of Neo-Tokyo. How many more can you save if you keep fighting? And how many parts of me will you steal in the process?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the metal walls. "I can't even remember my fake mother's face anymore. In 6 months, I won't even remember my own name." That's when something happened that changed everything. Kenji crawled out of my pocket, his little origami wings unfolding as he positioned himself between me and Yamamoto. His LED lights flashed, in a sequence I had never seen before, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer the childish synthesis I knew. "Akira-chan," he said in a familiar adult male voice. "I'm sorry." My blood ran cold. "Kenji?" "My real name is Dr. Hiroshi Sato," the robot continued, its lights pulsing with data it was transmitting in real time. "I was the chief scientist on the Chimera project. My consciousness was transferred to this robotic body 3 years ago when I developed terminal cancer. I was assigned to be your companion to monitor your emotional development." The world around me began to spin. You spied on me for 3 years?" While I loved you like family? At first, yes, admitted the consciousness in the robot. But something unplanned happened. I began to genuinely care about you. Watching you grow up, seeing your courage on the streets, your kindness to other refugees. You became the daughter I never had. Tears of betrayal burned my eyes. Lies. It's all lies. No, said Kenji Dr. Sato, moving toward me with smooth mechanical movements. My love for you is real, Akira. It's the only real thing in this whole situation. And that's why I'm going to help you escape. Yamamoto stepped forward, activating security protocols in his exoskeleton. Dr. Sato, you are violating direct orders. Step away from the weapon. She's not a weapon, exploded the robot, its lights flashing furiously red. She's a person, a bright, brave girl who deserves to choose her own destiny. Kenji's small mechanical body began to transform, plates unfolding to reveal equipment I never knew existed. Holographic projectors, neural interference devices, even a small energy weapon. For 3 years, I had carried a miniaturized military arsenal without knowing it. The containment system in this cell was designed to prevent your escape, Dr. Sato explained through the robot. But I have administrative access codes. I can open a 15-minute window before security reacts. Yamamoto drew a neural weapon, his human features hardening into a mask of military determination. Dr. Sato, if you open this cell, you will be condemning humanity. Akira is our only hope against the next wave of invasions. Then perhaps humanity deserves to be extinct, the robot replied bitterly, if our survival requires enslaving genetically modified children. The tension in the air was palpable. 2 men who had dedicated their lives to creating a living weapon now stood on opposite sides of its fate. And I, the weapon in question, was caught in the middle, trying to figure out if I had enough humanity left to make a moral choice. That's when I felt the dragons calling me. Even disconnected from the neural cables, I could feel their hybrid consciousnesses whispering in my mind. They had tasted alien blood and wanted more. Their hunger mingled with my own rage, creating a thirst for violence that threatened to consume any remaining rationality. I could kill you both right now, I said, my voice strangely calm. I could call the dragons through the remote interface and turn this academy into a floating tomb. Both men stood motionless, recognizing the truth in my words. But I won't, I continued, making a decision that would define not only my future, but possibly that of all humanity. Because despite everything you've done to me, there are still 20 million people in Neo-Tokyo who deserve to live. And if I'm really the only one who can protect them. I paused, looking alternately at Yamamoto and the robot that housed Dr. Sato's consciousness. Then I'll accept being a weapon, but on my own terms. My conditions were simple but revolutionary by military standards. I would fight to protect humanity, but no longer as a blind weapon. I would be a soldier with free will, making my own tactical and moral decisions on the battlefield. Impossible, Yamamoto said immediately. Military operations require a clear chain of command. You can't just, I can do anything I want, I interrupted, my voice laden with an authority that surprised even me. You created a sentient weapon capable of destroying entire cities. Now deal with the consequences. Dr. Sato, through Kenji's robotic body, flashed her lights in approval. She's right, General. We can't create true artificial intelligence and then expect it to obey blindly. Akira has transcended the original parameters of the project. I spent the next 2 weeks negotiating the terms of what I began to call the Moral Autonomy Protocol. I would have complete access to all intelligence data on alien movements. I could choose which battles to fight and how to fight them. More importantly, I would have the right to refuse orders I considered ethically questionable. In exchange, I offered something no military officer had ever dared to dream of: total control of the 5 cybernetic dragons for an indefinite period of time, with no risk of fatal neural fragmentation. The key lay in a discovery I made during my private experiments with neural interfaces. Instead of fighting the loss of human memories, I began to embrace it as evolution. I created an emotional backup system where I recorded my most significant experiences in a separate data, matrix, accessible even when my main mind was fragmented between the dragon's consciousnesses. The process was painful. Each emotional backup required me to relive intense memories while encoding them into digital format. But it allowed me to retain my essential humanity, even while operating as a quintuple hive mind. The first real application of the Moral Autonomy Protocol came 3 weeks later, when a new wave of alien ships was detected approaching Kyoto. This time, it was different. Instead of simply launching the dragons in attack formation, I first analyzed the enemy's movement patterns for 6 hours. I discovered something that conventional military strategists had missed. The aliens were trying to surround specific facilities rather than causing indiscriminate destruction. "They're after something," I reported to Yamamoto during the tactical briefing. "Hospitals, universities, research centers, they want to capture our medical technology, not just exterminate us." The general frowned, studying the data I projected through the holographic interface. "How did you come to that conclusion?" "Because I think like them now," I replied, the truth of that statement sending a chill down my spine. During my weeks of interfacing with the dragons, I had developed an intuitive understanding of predatory mentality. They're harvesting resources, not just hunting. This revelation completely changed our strategy. Instead of intercepting the alien ships in the air, I prepared an ambush at the facilities they were most likely to attack. I positioned the dragons at strategic points around Kyoto University Hospital, knowing that the creatures would try to capture advanced medical equipment. When the attack began, I was ready. But this time, the fight wasn't just about destruction. While Blue Ryujin and Green Siryu faced off against the attack ships, I used Red Suzaku to evacuate civilians from the danger zones. White Byakuo created energy barriers to protect refugees, while Black Genbu analyzed the aliens' behavior patterns in real time. It was during this battle that I made the most significant discovery of all. The aliens weren't just mindless predators. They had families. Through the dragon's sensors, I detected small support ships protecting those that clearly carried young of their species. The invaders were desperate, fleeing some catastrophe on their own world and trying to find resources to save their own kind. For a terrible moment, I recognized a mirror of the human situation. 2 species fighting for survival, each seeing the other as monsters to be exterminated. "Cease fire," I ordered through the neural interface, paralyzing all 5 dragons simultaneously. "Akira, what are you doing?" Yamamoto's voice exploded through the communicators. "End the mission!" "No," I replied, my fragmented consciousness processing thousands of moral variables per second. "There are children on the enemy ships. Families. They are not monsters. They are refugees." Through the Red Suzaku, I projected a universal communication hologram, mathematical symbols, and geometric patterns that any intelligent species could understand. It was a desperate attempt at communication, a plea for truce based on mutual recognition of sentience. What happened next would change the course of the entire war. The alien ship stopped firing. Slowly, carefully, the lead ship projected a response, complex mathematical patterns that expressed concepts of need, desperation, and hope. Over the next 6 hours, as I hovered over Kyoto with 5 cybernetic dragons as my armed guardians, I conducted the first diplomatic negotiation between humans and aliens in the history of warfare. I discovered that they called themselves Zephyrians, refugees from a solar system that was being consumed by a dying star. They were not conquerors. They were desperate survivors trying to find a new home for their young. The attacks on human cities had been misguided attempts to establish outposts for colonies. "This is unacceptable," Yamamoto said when I reported the results of the negotiation. "You have no authority to conduct interstellar diplomacy." "Do now," I replied calmly, "because I've discovered something you missed. This war can end without mutual genocide." The solution I proposed was revolutionary. Underwater Zephyrian colonies in Earth's oceans, where their organic technology could flourish without interfering with human settlements. In exchange, they would share their advanced biotechnology, accelerating our medicine and agriculture by centuries. It wasn't easy to convince either side. Humans saw the Zephyrians as monstrous invaders. The aliens saw humans as violent primitives. But I had a unique advantage. Through my interface with the dragons, I could physically demonstrate the benefits of symbiotic cooperation. During a crucial meeting between leaders of both species, I connected simultaneously to the 5 dragons and a small Zephyrian spacecraft they allowed me to interface with. For 15 agonizing minutes, my consciousness stretched across 6 different life forms, 5 machine-organic hybrids created by humans, and 1 purely organic creature shaped by alien evolution. The experience nearly killed me, but it proved that biological cooperation between our species was possible. 6 months later, the first Zephyrian underwater colonies were established in the Japan Trench. Their biomedical technology had cured diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia, while our mechanical engineering allowed them to build impossible structures in their ocean habitats. As for me, I had become something unique to both species, a living bridge between 2 completely different life forms. The floating academy was transformed into a diplomatic station where human and Zephyrian representatives worked together on cooperative projects. The 5 cybernetic dragons were rebuilt as mobile ambassadors, capable of operating in both the Earth's atmosphere and alien aquatic environments. Dr. Sato managed to transfer his consciousness into a more advanced android body, becoming my official advisor and the closest thing I had to a real father figure. Yamamoto, surprisingly, accepted my evolution beyond military parameters and became an advocate for interspecies cooperation. But the most significant change happened within me. Through the emotional backups I had created, I was able to reconstruct a hybrid identity that incorporated both my original humanity and the expansions of consciousness I had gained through the neural interface. I was no longer completely human, but I was also no longer just a weapon. I was something new, an evolution. One night, as I stood on the balcony of the diplomatic station looking out over Tokyo Bay, I felt a familiar presence beside me. It was Kenji, not the original robot, but Dr. Sato in his new android body, carrying an updated version of my old companion. "Do you miss being fully human?" he asked, following my gaze to the lights of the city where millions of people lived their lives in peace, thanks to the agreements we had negotiated. I thought about the question for a long moment, processing it through the multiple layers of consciousness that now permanently inhabited my mind. "No," I replied finally, "because I've discovered that humanity isn't about biology or memories or even individual emotions. It's about choice, about using whatever power you have to protect those who can't protect themselves." Through the neural interface, I could feel the 5 dragons sleeping in their hangars, their hybrid consciousnesses dreaming of flight and protection instead of hunting and destruction. And in the ocean below, Zephyrian colonies built new homes, while their children played in underwater currents, safe for the first time in generations. Perhaps my entire life had been fabricated. Perhaps every memory worth having was artificial. But the choices I made, the future I helped create, and the lives I saved through this impossible cooperation, those were real. And in the end, I discovered that this was more than enough to define me as human. And so ends our journey through the Quantum Dragon Academy, Young Supernatural Beings. A story about identity, moral choice, and what it really means to be human in a universe where the lines between natural and artificial have been completely blurred. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Young Supernatural channel for more stories that will stir your minds and hearts. And in the comments, give me a rating from 0 to 10 for this story. Your feedback is essential for us to continue bringing you stories that stick in your memory. Thank you for venturing with me on this disturbing and exciting journey. See you next time for more supernatural stories.